Thank you for watching this video from the Canada-Europe Transatlantic Dialogue at Carleton University. This event is sponsored by the Canada-Europe Transatlantic Dialogue, CETD, and the Faculty of Public Affairs Research Month at Carleton University. CETD receives funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The views expressed in this video are solely those of the presenter and do not reflect the views of the CETD, SSHRC, or Carleton University.
So, first of all, it's terrible to have the last speech of the day. I'm totally okay. It's here, but I hope I will be at least entertaining. I will try as much as I can. So when I was asked by Oliver to talk about the Europeanization of the migration policies in the EU, I said, yes, of course, this is a thing I've been working on for years, very interesting. And then when I started preparation, I realized that I'm talking about an ancient history, actually, and about the concept that is basically dead now. So I will probably talk more to the presentation of Andrew. I will give you a short background, and then I will try to explain what are the links between Europeanization and the current state of affairs in especially Eastern European member states. Okay, I thought that would be a good angle. So I will talk a little bit about migration policy on the EU level. Then I will explain what is Europeanization, because I assume not many of you here in this room know about it. And then I will go on to the case studies. So, as Andrew already alluded to, we have to understand that the only EU-level migration policies that we can talk about concern asylum and border controls. And there are also very few European directives on legal migration concerning very specific groups. What is important is that all these the directives do not tell the member states how many people can come or go, but it's more about giving or assuring equality of rights to all these groups across the EU. So EU can only legislate on the rights of the migrants when they come. All right, so what is Europeanization? Is basically a process in which the policies on migration across the 28 member states, but also beyond, converge. And we talk in the literature basically about two types of Europeanization. So we have bottom up, so how the policies become what they are on the EU level. When you think about asylum policy, and for example, the directive on the EU level that says what maybe rights an asylum seeker will have when he or she comes to the EU. The directive, this law, was not thought about by a practitioner or an official in the Commission. No. It was usually created based on the national laws or national experience of the most powerful or the most influential member states who come to the Commission and they say, oh, we have here this very good idea what you should put in the directive. And then it all goes through the EU process, right? And then is adopted or not on the EU level. So this is this bottom-up perspective, right? Then you have the top-down. This is what happens with this law when this is already an EU law and needs to get adopted by the member states. And this process is called transposition of law. But Europeanization is actually interested how this content, so the law, get adopted on the national level, but also how institutional framework is built and harmonized across the 28 countries. What is also interesting, the process of Europeanization concerns the beliefs about a given political issue, the identities that are related to this issue, and also the definition of interests. And this is actually this part that is the most interesting part about Europeanization, because it assumes that we are creating a common European understanding of the problems and solutions. Okay, so in the case of migration policy, we can say that as regards the content and institutional framework, we had a clear roadmap. So we had the member states that have clear ideological stand on migration and have policy experience, and they influenced what is inside the policy. And for example, when you think about asylum, you could think about Sweden as being actually a champion of the European asylum policy, influencing a lot what is inside the law. And then it was, of course, bottomed down in the negotiations. But this is one example. Then whatever was agreed was channeled towards less experienced countries. And the most important thing, the process of enlargement, and here I start talking about the Eastern EU member states, was the major vehicle for Europeanization and harmonization of the migration policy. That was because these countries were asked to align their policy solutions, obviously. Now, it also goes nowadays beyond the EU, because EU wants to champion its policy solutions also in the neighborhood. Basically, they say, look how fantastically we deal with the rights of, I don't know, legal immigrants. You can do exactly the same. For example, I don't know how many of you know this, the Russian law on highly skilled immigrants was in big parts a copy-paste from the EU directive on the so-called blue card. So there is this influence. So which policies got the more converged? Of course, border management, visa policy, and asylum. For obvious reasons, the EU reached the point where it has the legislative power, right? So obviously there you have the biggest Europeanization of content. Middle ground are all groups that are not that problematic. So you have students and the researchers, family reunification, and long-term residents. However, as regards legal migration for work, there, let's say the member states were not very happy with convergence, ever. Now, this graph explains a little bit also why the border management and asylum was particularly well adopted and Europeanized in Central and Eastern European countries before the accession. You will see that we already had one migration crisis in the early 90s, right? And this is exactly the moment where Eastern European post-communist states applied for the membership in the EU, right? So obviously, as Andrew explained before, because EU has this tendency to externalize the crisis, at that time it externalized the crisis to the candidate states. So Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, all these countries, right? So they were the Turkey of today, in a way. Okay, I will skip that because Andrew explained that already. So what is interesting is the Europeanization of beliefs, interests, and identities. So in the case of Poland, when you think about it, 1990 is a year where everybody is happy because we have open borders for the first time, right, for a very long time. But basically, 2 years after, we are asked to close these borders because we have to cooperate with the EU on controlling migration, right? So, and we are being told, I'm using we, but well, in a way, I'm Polish, right? That this is a European thing to do because you have to be able to control your borders, right? And I, at that time, in the mid-90s, I was a part of a research team that did the research exactly on that issue. So the discourse was basically like this, that we have to do it because we want to be European, right? And that was in the country that did not have immigration at all. That was below 0.01%. And we had a big emigration. 2 million people moving in and out of the country for a decade. Then we had also external pressures, especially from the neighbor, but Germany. I think that Poland was the first country that ever that signed a readmission agreement with Germany and got the status of the safe third country, you know, for 1 billion Deutschmarks at that time. Just to be clear, now the Turks get 3, right? So a better deal. Then we also participated in processes called regional consultative processes. For example, a Budapest process. And this is where basically this, let's say, education, policy learning takes place. So people talk to other people, the technicians in migration policy talk to others and explain them what the best practice is. And this is actually the main vehicle for the discourse. And the discourse is dual, and this is important. For all these years, before the enlargement, but also after, the countries in Eastern Europe were hearing, on one hand, migration is terrible. This is a security issue. You have to close your borders. Asylum seekers are bogus asylum seekers, so you have to learn how to deal with them. And on the other hand, they were hearing, yes, but you know, we have our European values. We belief in human rights. However, the discourses on the technical and political level were always more on the security side. Okay, so in the countries where you don't have immigration, immigration is not a political issue. You learn from the outside how to talk and think about it, right? This is obvious. I don't have this graph here, but I wanted to tell you that you have to actually believe me. In 1995, a survey of the Polish population asked, would you mind having a migrant living next to you? Reported 88% no. But it wasn't because they liked the migrants so much. No, they interpreted migrant as an immigrant, the Polish immigrant who will return to Poland, you know. So even the idea of an immigrant was not there, right? So what happened now? People watched a lot of media, especially the Western media portraying issues with the integration of the Muslims, you know, on the West. Terrible things. I actually interviewed one guy who was, I have to conclude, okay, who was responsible for the Polish migration policy for 15 years. And he told me, you know what, I will do everything to have these phenomena that they have in London and Paris in miniature here in Poland, because of the media discourse about the issues that you have with the diversity. So fast forward to now, in 2015, in October, this is the first time immigration actually appears in the public debate at all, right? Also, again, because of the media story about the refugees invading Europe. In Poland, we had 100 Syrians asking for asylum, okay? Not 1 million. No one really noticed. No one noticed 80,000 Chechens, you know. But now this is an issue. And we still have only 1% of immigration in the country. So this is the conclusion. So actually there is a limit to Europeanization. It can be successful as regards the content, but what is more important is the lack of control. What belief systems are actually diffused and adopted? So if you have two discourses, maybe the states that you target will actually take only one, and not the one of the human rights, like in this case. And what we have now, we have still this push to Europeanize the answer to the problems, but this is a bottom-up solution offered by Germany, very single-handedly, especially last Monday. And top-down does not work anymore. So this is why I think that Europeanization is actually a dead end in this sense. Thank you.